call the meeting to order as it is 7 o'clock. Good evening, Exeter. Good evening to my colleagues on the board, respective town staff, and those here attending the meeting this evening. Good evening to those watching at home on TV or on social media. Welcome to the September 13th, 2021 Town of Exeter Select Board meeting. I'll start by introducing the board. I will mention that we have two board members absent this evening, but we do have a quorum, so we will continue with our meeting. To my right, Selectwoman Lovey Rountriolif. Good evening.
Good evening.
And to my left, the clerk, Selectwoman Julie Gilman. Good evening.
Good evening.
I'm Nico Papakostendis, and to my all the way down to the left is our town manager, Mr. Rustine.
Good evening.
Good evening. And our recording secretary, Joanna Bartel. Good evening, Joanna. Okay. We have a few very interesting presentations this evening. Let's get through a few things on the agenda first. This is public comment. This is an opportunity for the public to weigh in with any comment. We do ask, though, that if your comment is relative to anything on the agenda, you wait until that agenda item comes up. And I'll pause for a moment. Seeing no public comment, we will move on to approval of minutes. We were all present for the August 16th, 2021 meeting minutes. So I would ask that we address those first. Are there any revisions or amendments to the August 16th, 2021 minutes?
No.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I move to approve the minutes of August 16th, 2021.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passes 3-0. I would ask the board to move to table approving the regular meeting minutes of August 23rd, 2021. Selectwoman Rountree, if you weren't here, so we don't have a quorum for that.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passes 3-0. And the meeting minutes of August 23rd, 2021 are tabled. I'm also going to ask that the board table the appointment for the Rec Advisory Committee. Again, we do not have a quorum. Although I'll throw this out to the board, I typically abstain from voting on the Rec Advisory Committee, and in fact, I abstained at the last meeting, and that's because of my wife presently chairing. I will leave the discussion up to you, Selectwoman Gilman, Selectwoman Rountree, if you want to table it one more time, or, I don't mind making an exception and voting, but I'll gather your thoughts.
Well, we have a quorum and we can go ahead and do it so I'm going to go ahead and make the motion. I move to appoint Dick Matthews as a full member to the Rec Advisory Board for a term to expire 4/30/23.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
And I will vote aye. Passes 3-0. And I know they have a meeting coming up at the end of the month, so it'd be nice to have him there. With that, we can move right into our discussion items this evening. At this time, I would like... I'm
Chair, we have...
Oh, thank you. One last resignation to consider. We have the resignation from the Budget Recommendations Committee from Don Clement. So regretfully, I would seek a motion to accept the resignation from Don Clement from the Budget Recommendations Committee.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes 3-0. I did speak to Mr. Clement about a week or two ago and thanked him for his service on the BRC, and he was a good voice, and he will be missed on the committee, but I know that he'll let us know how he feels from time to time. So thank you, Don. Okay, at this point, moving into the discussion items, we will open the first of two public hearings relative to the Mary Bauer Land Beach Hill Road, map 28, lot 16. This is an opportunity for the public to comment on this. We discussed this at the last select board meeting. This piece of land is being donated to the town if the Select Board so approves. The Conservation Commission and the Planning Board have both recommended that we accept this piece of property. Mr. Sharples, did you want to speak to this at all, or? Okay. And seeing nobody from the public, I would seek a motion to close the public hearing.
We didn't actually open.
We didn't really open it, so I'll take a motion to
Mr.
open.
Chair, I move to open the public hearing on the acquisition of the Bauer land as a donation to the Conservation Commission.
Second.
Second.
Anyone out there?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Public session is open. No public comment. I would seek a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We'll take this up again for a second public hearing on September 27th. So with that, this evening, we have Parks and Rec Director, Mr. Greg Bisson, here to go over the latest development from the Parks and Rec. I know there's a memo in our packet from Greg that he worked on with Russ detailing this opportunity that the Rec Department has. And there's a lot that will go into this. Obviously, I'm sure you will reach out immediately to the Facilities Committee, and also the Budget Recommendations Committee would have to vet this before it comes back to the board, and ultimately it'll be up to the voters at town meeting, but I won't steal your thunder, Mr. Bisson. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Greg Bisson, Exeter Parks and Recreation. As you see probably on the screen, but we have entered into a purchase and sales for 10 Hampton Road. And you'll see further on in my slides the location to kind of see why it's a strategic move for the Parks and Recreation. And I'm going to have to bounce it back and forth. Unfortunately, we don't have a clicker. That would be awesome. Thank you. 10 Hampton Road sits adjacent to the recreation park. We heard loud and clear from the voters last March, 2 Marches ago now, it seems, it is, that we need to come back and rethink of our opportunity to how to increase parking and create a home for the Parks and Recreation. Just recently, 10 Hampton Road, we approached the owner, hence why it actually did not make the CIP late in the summer. And we're able to agree upon the acquisition. What entails on 10 Hampton Road is a 1.64 acres that abuts. In talking with Public Works, we believe we can expand parking by 60 to 80 parking spots. We are actually working on a layout now. It also will create an access point for the park up there. One of the things that really created the conversation I had with 10 Hampton Road was a softball parent had reached out to the current owner with a grandmother that wanted to access the softball fields to watch their granddaughter play. Unfortunately, it being private property, we didn't really allow that, but that started the conversation which prompted us to move forward. The building itself is very big. It's 6,000 square feet. Currently, it includes 12 small offices, a small kitchen, 4 bathrooms, 2 multi-purpose rooms, a welcome lobby, and a coffee room and outdoor deck. And also on the property is a detached garage and office space. If you want to click that one down. Yep. Why is this so important for the future of Parks and Rec? Location, location, location. One of the things that we know is the property at 4 Hampton Road is very challenging. Having an opportunity to purchase a property that is abutted by 2 commercial properties gives us the ability to expand parking without impacting the area. Expanding parking as well as for the field, but also for us to relocate our offices. Currently, we have 15 parking spaces in our offices on 32 Court Street. This would allow us to have a lot more, so we could actually have more programming going on. We could utilize the building in its current state with minimal renovations. We want to make sure we listen to the taxpayers, and we'll go slow in trying to fix up the building. The building's in tremendous shape already, having been renovated in '92, and 2010, and 2012, and in 2020, a new roof. It is more cost-effective to renovate the existing building than to purchase a new piece of property or build. This would also give us access for our summer camp. As you all know from the video, we used to cram the kids into the bathhouse on rainy days. This would actually give us access to it. The bathhouse is approximately 1,800 square feet. This is 6,000, of course. We'd also be able to, future programming could be expanded. And for the full-time staff that manage the summer camp and the pool, having quicker access to the facility would increase safety and productivity. We spend a lot of time going up Hampton Road and High Street back and forth all summer. And then finally, again, creates an access point where we do not currently have one. And to give you a better view, yeah, you can go right to the next slide. It gives you an idea of where the property is located. This is an old map because the softball fields haven't been renovated, and Acadia Lane actually hadn't even been built yet. So this would allow us to put parking in the back as well as along the sides. The white structure you see on the map on the 10 Hampton Road is an old barn that is no longer there. That has been torn down because it was decrepit. So that is one of the things that we wanted to make sure people know the location. It is a great opportunity for us. What we need to do immediately is create an ADA entrance to the building. Bring the downstairs bathroom up to ADA compliances with higher toilets, new sinks, additional handrails, and an adult changing table. Configure a couple existing downstairs office spaces to make programming rooms, tie into the town's network, and then create additional parking. We expect the 2022 budget renovation cost no more than $100,000. However, we are currently working with to finalize the numbers, which we will have when we go actually to the facilities committee, the planning board, as well as the BRC. And then you keep on going. Future renovations we can get to. But what really impacts the taxpayers immediately, if you want to go to the next slide, is this acquisition will minimize our current asks in the CIP. Currently, we have an athletic field for $4.5 million. We would actually remove that because we are adding parking, but we will go to expand the future parking, or the main parking lot at a future date. We would eliminate the accessibility assessment of 3032 Court Street. If we are moving our property here, our offices here, we do not need to evaluate Court Street. The Court Street property would be up to the select board what they want to do. And then also modify the future capital improvement plan from the $6.5 million we had originally asked for a multi-generational community center to $2 to $3 million, 6 to 8 years out. So this is not something in the immediate future we'd be looking to do, but it would be something that we'd look to add additional, a small gymnasium, additional programming and meeting space, department storage, and access to bathrooms, because currently we have porta potties that man it. So that is where we are at. We are still working with some consultants to try to get those numbers finalized for you and the BRC and the facilities committee. But we look forward to working with all these boards as we move forward and purchase the strategic part of our mission.
Terrific.
Mr. Chair, could I?
Please.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank also Darren Winham in Economic Development. He actually had helped out with the purchase and sale agreement quite a bit during the process, looking at comparables and so forth. So just wanted to acknowledge his efforts in this.
Absolutely.
And he was able to negotiate it down from the original $1.35 million to $1.15 million. So he was able to knock $200,000 off of the asking price.
Mr. Dean, did we want to get into, I think it's in the packet. I know it's in the packet, Greg, but Did you want to talk about the value of the land?
Oh, yes. We saw a expert real estate person in the area and asked them, fair market value right now is about 800,000 to 1.3. So we feel that this is right in that medium price. So it's comparable to what the going rate is for all property. So this is an opportunity. And the one thing more important to mention, Mr. Chair, is this is an opportunity that we'll only get once. Once if this does not pass in March, this property will probably be sold and developed to any developer because, as we know, housing is a premium right now.
We've also done some preliminary tax impacts, and basically we'd be looking at probably a 10-year bond to buy this property. So we plugged in a number of $1.25 million for that, and that comes out to a tax impact of approximately 6 cents per thousand on the tax rate. So that works out for a $300,000 home to be about $19, just under $19.
Okay. Thank you.
And that doesn't take into account all the avoided costs. Obviously, Greg went through that. As far as the capital improvement program, by acquiring this property, we would be strategically situated to not have to do several things that have been identified in the CIP. So that has value as well.
And I understand years down the road, you have other hopes. We talked about, it's near and dear to my heart having a multi-generational center, but obviously having gone through the last year that we've gone through, that may have to wait a little bit, but you're confident that if this were to pass, the absolute necessary renovations would be capped at around $100,000?
That's correct, yes.
Okay.
We can get by with $100,000 and slowly but surely chip away at anything that would need to be upgraded over time. We're not coming in asking for and it's something that we could probably absorb in the town budget as well. So it's not going out to, for instance, we will need to get the second floor bathroom ADA compliant down the line, but not something high priority right now.
And presumably, even with that, it would be in a lot better shape than what you're currently in.
Correct.
now.
Currently our building doesn't even have a bathroom on the second floor.
Right.
And this current structure actually has 2 bathrooms on the second floor. So it already doubled what we have on the second floor, as well as providing opportunity to expand a lot more programming space than we ever had.
Okay.
Just in this building. Remember, our Court Street property only has 1 meeting space on the first floor, and that is smaller than any of these rooms that we would be utilizing.
Okay. Questions from the board? Selectwoman Round-Triola, do you have any questions or comments?
Just in terms of spacing within the center itself, how many offices do they currently have? Is there enough for current staff, and will there be enough if staff expands? And
well, we don't foresee expanding staff, but there's currently 12 offices. There are 5 that we identified as being key to being in the front where people would walk in that we are easily be able to provide customer service. There are several on the second floor that we would be turning into programming space down the line. So there's plenty of room, and then the property itself allows for other expansion down the line as well to really make it that true multicultural or multi-generational community center. The best thing is it is a lot. It's double the size lot than we currently have, where we are very pigeonholed to what we have, and this just allows people, and especially those that play softball and soccer, having that ability instead of crossing 27. That's something we know is one of our big things that we've targeted, is trying to make it a safer passage. So at least providing 60 more parking spaces will lessen the impact on 27.
thank you.
This property, Mr. Chair, is also located in between 2 commercial properties. So the residential impact on the abutters is far less pronounced than building on the site.
Good point. Selectwoman Gilman?
No, I see a lot of benefits to this. I see that having it where it is being a second entrance to the ball field or to that end of the recreation fields is a real plus for, as you said, the grandmother that wants to go to see their kids play. Right now, they have to travel quite a distance from where the parking lot is. So that's a plus. And then easier anyway, upgrades to facilities for bathrooms and multi-purpose rooms. I think it's a great idea.
So, Mr. Bisson, I think this is an exciting opportunity, and as you put it, sometimes these things only happen once.
Correct.
So I appreciate the work that you and Mr. Wyndham and Mr. Dean put into this to present to the board and to the public, ultimately, at town meeting. I would encourage you, though, to consider the following: reaching out to the Facilities Committee, BRC, and Planning Board sooner than later, and getting their input. We have a lot of resources between those two committees and that board, particularly the Facilities and the BRC. And though Mr. Dean brought up a good point that the direct abutters are two commercial properties, presumably we'll reach out to them if we haven't already. I'd still suggest that you consider reaching out to the immediate neighborhood sooner than later, just to let them know that this is an opportunity, could be on the warrant, will be on the warrant, and start to have a conversation about any concerns, again, sooner than later.
Absolutely, and that's one of the things, once we went on to make it official, emails already been drafted to go to all the various chairs of those boards to make time for me to come to one of their meetings and discuss, and hopefully work hand in hand so we can develop this piece of property that will benefit the community for the next 50 to 100 years.
And, I've sat between the BRC and sitting here on the board. I've seen a number of different ideas presented over the last couple of years with a project. And I think that the consensus we heard not only from other boards and committees, but also from the voters was maybe too much too fast. And I like the fact that this opportunity presents a way that you can gradually build up to what, some of us or most of us aspire to allow our community a place to enjoy recreation and also to bring your offices up to the 21st century. Presumably, even though you'll need to renovate here, I would think that right now this building is probably more sustainable than the building that you're in now in terms of energy costs.
I am actually comparing it, and it actually is quite a bit. The current owner gave me utility bills for the last 2 years. 2020 was a tough one to judge because they had been shut down since March.
Right.
So their heating costs, their electrical costs were, their heating costs were down. Their electrical costs were not. Computers have to stay on for people to work remote. So that's one of the things that they realized. But yes, and there's potential even more. The angle of the building, Mr. Chair, allows for additional energy efficiency to go into it, such as solar panels. That's one of the things, especially if we do 8 years down the road, put on an addition. That's another one. As well as this building has forced hot air throughout it. We do not have forced hot air at Court Street. It is a radiator system, so at least there's an opportunity there to provide a healthier atmosphere for being inside the building as well.
Okay. And I would guess I don't know the property owner personally, but obviously, I think you may have alluded to this earlier, that, the land may be worth more than what this price is, but he obviously wanted the community to have an opportunity to.
Yes, and I call this the one silver lining of COVID. We wouldn't have had this opportunity if he didn't reimagine his own business model. And he had a lot of people approaching him. He hadn't even put it on the market yet. It was that one simple phone call about a grandmother that really started the conversation, and he really bought into it and said, you know what, I want to do something good for the town.
Okay. So I think it's safe to say that back when we were looking at past parts of this project, this property was not available, or we hadn't even had conversations.
It was not available. The only thing he would look at possibly doing is granting us an easement to access the fields. That's about it.
Okay.
It wasn't, and he has been very generous as well, Mr. Chair. He has allowed us still to be able to bring our porta potties on his own property. But it's strict, only staff only can use that access or a vendor. So no patrons are able to use it.
And not to stray too far away, but I know Planet Playground is always a concern for folks. Would this, would the potential purchase of this property or this opportunity allow you to maybe revisit how we revise Planet Playground?
Yes, we are actually looking, and ironically, I actually just spoke to the lawyer of the current owner of Planet Playground, and that sale is still in HUD limbo, I should say. And it could take up to 2 years to actually complete it. So I bounced a few ideas off of Russ of how to relocate it now that we don't have to rely on the other parcel of Hampton Road, how we can relocate it on site.
Okay. Any questions or comments from the public this evening?
I have one more, Mr. Chair.
Please.
Just for full disclosure, the property owner's name is Phil Dean, and but he is no relation to me. I just wanted to make sure I said that. Both of our names are on this purchase and sale agreement.
Thank you for clarifying that. It's important. Okay, well, thank you. We look forward to hearing how the progress that you make with the various committees, and I know you'll be back soon.
Yes, sounds good.
All right, good job so far.
Thank you.
All right. Our third discussion item is another exciting presentation. And just by way of history, Mr. Andrew Elliott, who's here this evening, and first of all, I want to thank you for helping Greg with the slides. I appreciate that. I think earlier this summer, Mr. Elliott approached several board members individually to talk about Washington Street and some concerns he had and some ideas that he had. And ultimately, I believe it was in late June, Mr. Elliott, you came forward at public comment to speak about Washington Street and to submit a citizens petition that you had written and that had the 25 or more signatures. And essentially, the citizens petition was to raise and appropriate the sum of $260,000 for design, construction of road improvements, sidewalks, tree work on Washington Street. And Mr. Elliott approached me sometime in early August with this presentation that's in the packet and asked to be on the agenda for a future meeting. And tonight worked for our schedules, and we're excited to hear from you. So, Mr. Elliott, I will not steal your thunder.
Sandy, would you be technical person? So, just the forward arrow on the thing. All right, can you hear me? Yep. So actually, this whole process started in May, talking to Mr. Sharples here, just because the town was pointing me towards Dave first to basically talk about how to slow down traffic on Washington Street. And this is really what the presentation is about, is that Washington Street is a very busy street with lots of people, and it's a very straight street, so people go pretty fast. And if you go to the next slide, yeah, the down button, or the next, down, yep, there you go. Right, so I like to always start off with some numbers, and basically this is statistically speaking, if you're hit by a car going 40 miles an hour, you've got an 85% chance of being dead afterwards. As you reduce that speed, logically, it goes, those numbers of death go down. And if you're hit when you're going 20 miles an hour, your chances of being dead is 6%, right? So it's a significant difference between 20 and 40 miles an hour. And there's a lot of reasons why people speed. And from the research, it really is about personal attitudes, skills, like the weather, police presence. When the police are on the road, people do slow down. When there's the spot sign for the speeding, people slow down. But all of these factors really don't change the overall reason why people speed, and which is that they go as fast as the road will let them go, and they feel comfortable going, right? That's how people drive, right? If you go to the next slide. So why are we talking about Washington Street? So we have posted 25 mile an hour speed limit, but according to the town ordinances, it's not on the books, so it's actually technically 30. But it's a straight road, and it's a very wide, I'd say very wide. It's wide enough that you can park on both sides and still get 2 cars down. So people feel like they can go really fast on this road, and they do. Like just looking at these pictures, actually on that bottom one there, Brentwood Road, so that's coming off from a highway onto a residential, connector road, that there's no sidewalks, and people take that, especially after the new intersection's been designed, the people are not really slowing down at the stop signs anymore, so now they're whipping around from 27 and whipping down 111. No sidewalks. The chances of somebody getting hit there is just incredible. I fear for my life whenever I walk this way, and I try never to. Oh, and that's Sandy's house on the right there. She's the technical person tonight. So actually, I started with on the 8th of June. Actually, no, even back in May, I talked to Detective Page here about the speeding, and he was nice enough to sort of get us a speed survey going, and has been able to get like the radar board out there to slow people down. So in May we had that discussion, and it took a little while before we got the camera back up and running, but in June we actually did a speed survey, and I actually did watch the recording from last week's where they were talking about that stop sign and giving you the data, and they only pointed to the data about the 85th percentile and things like that, but realistically the maximum speed was 50 miles an hour, so you can go 50 on that road, and some people choose to do that, and more than 2,000 cars per day are going faster than the speed limit, I believe, if I can try and remember how that works, but the numbers are all here. I did it in my head a while back, but you've got 1,200 people going more than 24 miles an hour, and I do want to just point out that this data was taken a week after the signboard was placed on our street, and 3 out of 4 of those days there was police presence posted on that street. Coincidental? I don't know, but I think it was because there was a lot of complaining going on at that time, so they posted more police officers. So I wouldn't even say that this is necessarily the most accurate data, because I know if I see a cop, I slow down. So, and 3 out of the 4 days, which is not typical for Washington Street. I don't know if you guys know the numbers on how many days, percentage-wise, the cops are on the street, but I can tell you it's not 75% of the days. Nor would we want it to be. We don't want police there all the time. But anyways, you can go to the next slide. And as you can see here, I mean, everybody knows Washington Street because everybody uses it. It's the street for the city of Exeter. I mean, I'm not saying we should change it in any way other than finding a way to slow people down. There's 3 highways, the intersection of this road here, and I've lived there on the street for 9 years now, since 2012, and it's just gotten busier and busier and faster, and well, maybe not faster and faster, but definitely busier and busier, and when you have more people, the percentage of people going fast is still the same, so there's just more speeders as well. And this is coming from, we're making a lot of decisions as a town, like making it an economic development area on Route 27 to bring in business, great. But we really need to consider how that's impacting the streets that are going to handle all that traffic. So if you're coming from anywhere this way on the map, or really this way on the map, you're going on pretty much Washington Street to get to that 27. And with all the new construction that's going on there, it's just gotten very, 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 very busy. And I don't see it going anywhere except continuing to get busier. So we need to do something to change this. All right, next slide, I think. So I think what cities are doing now, and I think Dave is trying to do the complete streets. I saw that in the capital improvement plan, which is great. But there's a lot of things that can be done in terms of like road or lane diets, basically making it thinner, or traffic calming, like, raised intersections, curb extensions, speed bumps. Talking to some of the folks in the Department of Public Works and other places, they don't like speed bumps because of the plows and whatnot. But there are things that can be done, and they should be done given the nature of the amount of cars and the amount of people on this street. Actually, I had made an update to this presentation because I just wanted to, and I'll send it to you guys later, but it's just a picture of all the kids playing on the street. I mean, my kids are actually 9 and 6. And then because of that, I know most of the kids on the street. And, I've got, I counted 11 kids under 10 that live on this street. Josie, Ada, Weston, Kingston, Hayden, Clara, Maya, Max, Nala, they're all there, and they're all taking their life into their own hands when they go play anywhere near the street, because people are going fast. All right, I said enough. Continue on. So,
Can I just add to that?
Huh?
Can I just add to that? We were talking about children playing on the street. Forgive me for interrupting. Sandra Angeloni, 84 Washington Street.
Thank you.
I've noticed a bus stop is on Brentwood, and the parents are walking up Washington at my end with no sidewalks, with little ones coming to get their children. So that's just another input for a seasonal aspect of it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, yes, definitely. So, what I would propose, and this is a proposition I've said to some of you folks, as well as Dave and others, just thinking just from the research I've done, the most applicable change that we can do to Washington Street is using things called horizontal deflection, which is basically you do little jut outs in the street in order to make the road feel less pleasant to drive. It's not less pleasant, but not as wide, so you feel the need to slow down because you have to navigate around these things. And I know this will work because I've parked my car on the street to do just that, to make the road smaller, actually on the advice of some folks may or may not be here today. So I think it does work. I know that it works, and if I do it and my neighbor directly across from me does it, it actually slows people down enough that they actually have to stop and look and pay attention. And there's just so many cars that actually works, because there's just so many cars they actually really do have to slow down. If you go to the next slide. So another reason why these sort of horizontal deflections, like a chicane, for example, could work is they're not very expensive to install. The estimates I got from the internet, I'm not a civil engineer, but from the internet, $2,500 to $1,600 each. I mean, it's really not that complicated. What we're asking to put in there is some, basically, road bump outs to cause people to slow down, because I don't want to put my car in the road, because my car gets damaged in the road. When you've got, 20, I don't remember the exact number, on those 4 days, 2,405 cars per day off season, only one of them has to be a jerk to do something like throw a hamburger in my window, which has happened, or knock off our neighbor's mirror, or sideswipe and then just leave. It happens all the time, and I don't want my car in there. The only car I put out there is my 2000 Camry, which is okay, honestly, if somebody throws a hamburger in my window. It's an annoyance, but it's not going to make me cry at night. But anyways, it's not something and this is not very expensive, 20-year shelf life on them. Basically, the most expensive part is if you have to change the utilities or the drainage, which I don't think you would need to do with some of these kinds of chicanes. So you can go to the next slide. It's just another one, and I feel like it could also add some green space into the street as well. I'd be happy to adopt any of those green spaces for as long as I live on Washington Street or whatever. And Jay Perkins has also said that he'd be able to donate trees through the Department of Public Works. Actually, I talked to Jay. He was one of the first guys I talked to, even mostly because there were a lot less trees on the street recently, but that was way back in May or something of the year. So he did say that he would be able to get us some trees if we needed it, and if we had something like this done. So adds green space, not very expensive, and will actually work to reduce the speeding on the street. I think if you go to the next one. Here's another potential option. It's a similar concept, but it's just, you do them on both sides. This is like having cars, and it's called a choker. It's very similar to parking 2 cars on either side of the street. And I know that, like I said, I know that to work, so this could also be a different option. I just picked these photos off the internet. All right, next slide. Complete streets, like, what Dave is working on is, having sidewalks and, things like that. So reading over our town's master plan, right? Exeter understands the value of increasing walking and biking opportunities. And in our charter, we're saying we need to prioritize high traffic areas for improved and enhanced walking and biking infrastructure that will help the town's target area most in need, as well as wisely spend limited funds. Right? That's from our charter. In our master plan, Washington Street is arguably one of the non-artery busiest roads. I wouldn't be surprised if someday soon it became considered an artery, especially since with the closure of Columbus Street, which was another connector road, you've now diverted all that traffic to 2 other connector roads, which will pretty soon probably mean that those 2 connector roads will be arterial roads as the city expands. And I'm okay with that as long as we get the traffic under control. 25 is fine. People going 25, safe, great, totally respectful. It's the several thousand cars a day that are not doing that, not acceptable. Next slide. So this is Complete Streets in Portsmouth, how they're doing it. I think we'll probably, I don't want to compare ourselves to Portsmouth anyway, I don't want to be Portsmouth. I want to be Exeter. I love Exeter, but at the same time, having a plan and being able to reuse some design aspects when you're making new projects, that seems like common sense, right? Like, you don't have to redesign every street if you've got a plan in place, like with Complete Streets, and says, this is the street, this is what it looks like, this is what we should be doing, if possible, right? So I think that would be a good opportunity. Next one. So for those of you on Zoom or get this on video later, there's my contact information. You can talk to me. I'd be happy to talk to you. So we've already done the citizens petition. So I'd like to see the town, if they can recognize the fact that this is a busy road that needs some work. So we'll put it to the vote in the next election in March, I hope, if I did my petition right. I've been working with Jen Perry over at the Department of Public Works. I was actually hoping she'd be here today because to me it does seem like the Department of Public Works are the ones that have to do this project, right? Dave made it clear it wasn't him. Please don't make streets, you guys don't make streets. It's the Department of Public Works, and I've been trying to work with Jen for a while. I reached out to her originally, just checking my dates here. I can't find the slide because I have it here, but sorry. Oh, here it is. So on the 14th of June, I met with Jen Perry for the first time and was told at that time that she needed a couple weeks with her team to get together and come up with the best approach for the street. We're now in the end of September. I appreciate that there are some, it's summer and it's difficult to get stuff done, but I've now left 2 unreturned phone calls and emails with her. So we need to move this along, and I feel stuck, and that's part of the reason why I'm coming here to talk to you guys, is I want to find a way to get it unstuck. And then I think if you go to the next slide, there's a couple other things in here, but this is just a petition. I think you already mentioned what it was. If you keep going, I don't know if there's anything else here I want to talk about. One more slide. Oh yeah, so this is just showing that the new intersection on 27, that now closes off Columbus Ave. closes a connector road, which is considered a busy road, so that traffic gets diverted to Washington. I don't know if you can see it here, but, you know, this was a connector road, right? The town planned on this being a busy road, and when they cut that off, these busy roads are now even more busy. So even before, it was bad back in May, and now it's just so many people. It's crazy. Next slide. I put this on here just because I hope to God this never happens. This is the Route 27 corridor study that was done, and having this I think this was just like pie in the sky stuff, so just wanted to point that out, but you can continue on. That's so I would like to know from the select board how we can actually update our ordinances, because I've been trying to figure out how to do that. I guess it involves 3 readings and things like that, and I'm asking you guys to start that process because I don't think I can do it. But add Washington Street to 25-mile-an-hour zone so it's official and part of the process. And the next slide. And I also reviewed our sidewalk management plan from 2014, which is, as far as I can tell, the most current plan for our sidewalks. And this was identified in 2014 as needing to be done, and it hasn't been done. So we're talking with a yearly budget of $120,000, and according to the last capital improvement project request, had 140 in the bank. 3 years later, this is really, 2014, I'm sorry, that's quite a lot more than 3 years. So, that many years later, that's now like $260,000 to do the sidewalks, and that's what I put in my citizen petition. I just took this number, $130,000, and adjusted for the cost increases in asphalt, because I had to start somewhere, and the sidewalks is, I think, where we need to start, because if we don't have sidewalks continuous through that street, somebody's going to get hit if they've not already been done at this point. So it's been identified, it hasn't happened. I don't want us to drag our feet. We need to make it happen. Next one. Okay, that's it. So the only other thing that I noticed is when the packet was put together, there was some talk about what capital improvement projects are in the works right now, including, I think it was, I'm trying to see, it's really, sidewalk, oh, that's not it, sorry. It's the West Side Drive and School Street area. These are 2 projects that are supposedly going to be in the process of being done. Neither one of those streets are through streets. Neither one of them see the volume that we do. I'm not saying that we shouldn't prioritize all streets, but all streets need to be improved, but we should start with the ones that have 2,500 cars a day on it, and not back burner this till 2026, as that was suggested, as far as I could tell in the packet. One of the other things I noticed, and I have to point it out because my wife's an architect, and it was very shocking when we saw the amount of money for these projects. I don't get it. Maybe Dave could talk about it, but for the School Street renovation, there's $345,000 for design work for that street. It's 2,200 feet. Google Map, ruler, not like.
It's the whole area. It's not just School Street. It's the area.
It's 3 streets. It's Garfield, School Street, Linden Street, and Kuzith Street, right? Those streets?
I believe so.
Yeah, so all those combined are 2,200 feet, and if you work out how much the design works costs for that, it's $160 per foot to design these improvements. It blows my mind. There's got to be something wrong with this. I don't get it. But regardless, the streets that need attention first before these ones are certainly Washington Street. Winter Street just got a nice upgrade with the sidewalks, but you're pushing a lot of traffic on, and I don't want to start to sound frustrated here, but it's been since May I've been trying to get something moving. I even asked, could I write a capital improvement project request? The answer was no. It's got to come from Dave's and Department of Public Works. I can't do the job for you guys. I have to present the data that I found and humbly request that we really make some movement on this, because pushing the people from the Columbus onto our street, building up Route 27, the town just expanding in general, as we know, it's just, in the 9 years, it's just been just so much, so different. And I actually have 2 letters from people who couldn't be here today, but I think I'll save them for you, because one, and you guys can read them at your own leisure. I'll send them to you by email, but Tom and Rebecca Bergeron sent an email. They've been on the street for 22 years, and they've seen this cycle a couple of times, and want to ask for some help. And then as well as Denise, she's been on the street for 44 years, and as well as has expressed her, concerns. So I'll send you those emails. So yeah.
Well, thank you. We would appreciate both of those, and also anybody else that's in the area. You had them in your presentation, but they're also on the website, our email addresses, and we look forward to hearing from the folks.
Absolutely.
So,
yep.
Before, I know I've got questions, and I'm sure the other members of the board do, but I know we have other staff here. I want to give them an opportunity. I don't know that they have anything, but I want to give them at least the opportunity to speak to any points that you made. And also, Mr. Dean, I'm sure you have a couple of points to make as well. So, Chief or Detective, I don't know if you have anything to add, or?
Briefly?
Sure.
Thank you. Stand by, Andrew.
Sure. Yes, Chief Stephen Poulin.
Good evening.
We have stepped up our directed patrols of that area, and I think the residents there have noticed that. And as far as the posted speed limit goes and the town ordinances, we're definitely willing to work with the board on that. There are several ordinances that we would help revise, and the speeding would be one of them. There are other roads in town that are also posted improperly as well, that we've identified, and we can work with the board and fix those.
I think we'd like to do that.
Yeah.
Is it?
Excellent.
Okay, thank you, Chief. Mr. Sharples, I don't know did you have anything? Okay,
I was just here.
Okay.
In case I was needed for.
thank you.
questions.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Dean?
The only thing I really wanted to add at this point is I know Mr. Vlasic weighed in from Public Works and talked about the sewer issues on Washington Street, and that we had done a water rehabilitation project on Washington maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and that now it's the sewer side that looks to be in rough shape out there, and that he's suggesting that those mains would need to be replaced at some point. So when we do a Public Works project, we really do try to lump together, if it has to be that way, water, sewer, and road reconstruction and sidewalks together as a unit, because obviously if you go in and you just improve the sidewalks and then you're digging them up the next year, that doesn't make any sense. So that is something that I'd like to ask the department for a little bit more detail on, and get back with the board on it. The other thing I just wanted to say is that the warrant article that Mr. Elliott submitted does have 25 registered voters on it, and will go to the voters in the spring. So maybe the voters will tell us exactly what we should be spending on Washington Street. And I just wanted to point that out, that article is valid and will go on the warrant for $260,000 in the spring. That's all I had on it.
Thank you. Selectwoman Montiolo?
Thank you, Mr. Elliott. I really appreciate your presentation and your comments, and I can appreciate your frustration as well. I live on a street there's a dead end, and people are flying up our street constantly and test driving cars. So I get the the anger when you're like, slow down. Some of the things I just want to put on record so that they can be brought up in discussion perhaps when Jennifer Perry is here next, is in regards to the bump outs and the, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly, chicanes, the things that jut out. It's just a question of plowing, street cleaning, parking spaces, that sort of thing. I just want to make sure, and also figure out why it was listed as not appropriate on the Portsmouth, their category. It was listed as not appropriate as an option. So I think if we can look into that and figure out and save ourselves time about that. I do like the idea, obviously, of sidewalks. I'm a huge fan of the more walking space, the better it is for public in general. And hopefully that would also ameliorate some of the issues that facing on with the speeding that goes on Washington. And obviously, as Mr. Dean said, if we can figure out what is it and how Washington Street itself is not necessarily the number one street to receive the updates that you're looking for, we can figure out why that is, so you're not sitting confused, for another 2 or 3 years as to why that's not happening. So a little bit of transparency. Other than that, I hear you, and I hear that there are others on your street who are as frustrated, and I'm hoping that with more information, we can figure out how we can help, even in the short term, and then figure out long term what's feasible.
Thank you. Selectwoman Gilman?
Yes, I agree with Selectwoman Round-Triola, especially about the short-term and long-term, because of the way of scheduling public works projects and when we can add water and sewer or fix the water and sewer and then pave over it, as opposed to, as Mr. Dean said, doing the road work first and then coming back and tearing it all up. I'm interested in some of the images of the different solutions, and I'm just wondering about this actual size of the street. I know that you can park on both sides, and that is a traffic calmer, if you want to call it that. But I was wondering about the off-street parking. I'm just throwing this out here as something I'd like to see, but I don't know if we can have a bike lane and widen the sidewalks, because I know they're narrow. I walked them with you, and we could barely be shoulder to shoulder. So, but that starts to take up driving room, and there's a lot that goes into this, and I'm just trying to figure out when is the best time to be talking about the warrant article without something more solid for people to grab onto in order to say yes or no. Because it's easy to say yes or no, improve Washington Street, there you go. But people also want to know what they're spending their money on. I'll tell you, the population there is probably doubled, at least since I was a kid. There's a lot more not single-family homes anymore. They've been converted. What else do I have? And I just wondered from observation if there's enough off-street parking for the residents, because that will factor into what kind of design the road has. And we would have to leave some space for, additional people that come in, or people with two-family cars or what have you. So if you observe that, like what it's like in the winter when we have a parking ban, if everybody finds a place on their street or in their, enough in their driveways, that's something to think about too, that we in some part of it, we may have to leave parking. And I think that is it. And I was wondering too if and this was the same question that we had regarding that intersection that changed. We were disappointed at the times of year that the speed was measured, the number of cars that were measured, and you mentioned that people going to school, walking their kids across Washington Street, if you've seen the increase since the schools have started and the buses have gone, and I imagine you have. Yeah.
Good point.
But it would change those numbers, I'm sure. I think that's it. I really appreciate all the work you've put into this. You've done a lot more research than I think anyone that's come in and wanted to change their street, so it's really appreciative.
Yeah, so can I just take a second? I don't know if I'm breaking quorum here or whatever, but to your point about the presentation and why it said traffic calming was not recommended, I think that's an old slide, and the Portsmouth one has designated different types of streets as different requirements. And originally I thought, when I originally did it, was Washington Street was a neighborhood slow street is what they would call it, but now finding this traffic study from 2014, it's actually considered a connector road. And I think probably Dave might know this better, but the most appropriate equivalent would be a city core connector, which is what Portsmouth would call Washington Street. And that one would say that that curb extensions and bulb outs like that would be appropriate in limited circumstances. So I think it's appropriate here. Because it certainly would help. And in terms of off-street parking, you know, there's room for wider sidewalks. But I wouldn't let the idea of waiting for the sewer to be replaced, because I was around when they did the water replacement, and I questioned why we didn't do the sewer at the same time, and at the time they said the sewer looked good and didn't need to get done. So 4 years is a big difference, and I appreciate that we need to get that done, but if you just look at that giant project that was done on Front Street, they did the whole street without touching the sidewalks. So we can do the sidewalks now and not wait for the streets. We can dig up the sidewalks and put in at least till the end of the road. And I think the biggest concern I had was when that discussion I had with Jen Perry, and I was really waiting to hear from like what the results were, was we needed to know if we had easements on those properties where we needed to put the sidewalk on either side of the street, because she's like, oh, if there's no sidewalks, there's probably a reason we don't have easements or something, or we don't have the property. I'd just be really happy if we could get the answer to that, right? Like, could we just find out if we can even do it? And I'd love to know. And then again, yeah, Bruce, I think is Detective Page rather, has offered to do another speed survey at some point in the future. I know you got a lot more places you wanted to do at some point, but I definitely think it'd be great to get that speed survey done again when we don't have police sitting on the street or signboards sitting up telling you to slow down. So I appreciate that, just to see what the numbers are on a normal day.
I'll tell you, there were some changes done around High Street at one point, and there were the property that wanted to change off-street had two people, one on either end, with radios writing down the car numbers. Actually, it wasn't about speeding; it was about access. But it was pretty interesting to see where where I turned into my driveway, they counted me, but then they didn't have to count me at that end. So you get some odd numbers like that, but that's just an aside. And that was privately done.
Yeah, and I know, I mean, if you read Tom and Rebecca's letter, they did a citizens traffic count 15 years ago to highlight the issue, and basically it was to no avail. So they're happy we're starting this again, and I think, let's work on the sidewalks. I mean, I don't know what's in the budget, but if it's there, let's do it somehow. And then the rest, I mean, yeah, absolutely, let's have a full plan. Let's not plan it at $160 per square foot, but let's get it done. Because if that's the cost of planning, then the $260,000 will go just to planning, right, for Washington Street. So that's.
It does take.
Could you hire somebody, like a couple civil engineers, for $350,000? You can hire 3 full-time engineers for a year, or 20 new UNH interns, for that kind of money. It blows my mind. Anyways, done.
Don't be done. I have a couple of comments that I want to make, but first I want to open it up to other members of the public. I know there's some other members of the public here. If you want to weigh in, certainly would love to give you the opportunity to do so. And if you just state your name and address for the record,
Sure.
Thank you.
Sandra Angelone, 84 Washington Street. I guess my biggest question after hearing all these statistics is, when you do the speed analysis, you get a vehicle count? You do? Is there any way to go back a year from the past to show what the increase is for us now? Because I've been using my little Nest camera, and I don't want to start throwing out numbers, but I'm just curious how much it's increased for us. Thank you, Chief.
Sure. We would have to go back and see if there were speed surveys that were kept back a year or so ago, or even further, to see what that would be. As far as doing another speed survey, you tell us when you want that and for how long you want it. I'm not going to say we're going to turn this into a Kansas City experiment, but we won't park on the road. We'll still drive through it as we need to, but we can certainly entertain that idea.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you for your question. Any other members of the public? Mr. Dean?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that to Mr. Elliott's question about the easements, we will get the answer to that.
Okay.
We'll work on that.
So, Mr. Elliott, thank you, first of all, very much for the work that you've done over the last half a year. And, I mean, this is a very thorough presentation. You put a lot of work and a lot of effort into it. And, you know, I certainly, you know, as a father of 2 children who lives in a neighborhood, I understand your frustration. I live in a half-mile horseshoe where if you don't live in my neighborhood or you're FedEx, you really don't have a reason, you know, there's people don't come down there, but there are people that speed, and the speed limit is 20. And to your point, you know, one time, you know, we had almost 30 kids in our neighborhood. We still have a lot, and they play in the street. So it's concerning, and I totally appreciate your, not only frustration, but obviously your concern for your children as well as your neighbor's children. So I know that that's why, one of the reasons why you took so much time to put the effort into this report. The one question I had, you answered, and that was, how did you come up with $260,000? Because, and as Mr. Dean said, your petition is worded correctly, and it will go on the warrant. So, you know, I want to be able, if people are asking me, you know, how are you coming up with the 260? I want to have that idea of, you know, obviously, you know, where you came up with that. So, I think, you know, I always like to end things with next steps. You know, you've put the time in, you've brought some neighbors. I know other neighbors have written to us. You've given us your time tonight, so what are our next steps? So I think, one, we've already come up with tonight. We're going to work with the police department to review the ordinances, not only for your street, but others that need to be revised. And I think that that's something we should do regularly. That only makes sense. So that's the first next step. The second next step is, I would like, since this is going to be a warrant article, I would like the Department of Public Works to come before the board, Mr. Dean, in the near future. And Mr. Elliott, I'll let you know when that is. You have my word on that. I will let you know when that is. I'd like Public Works to be able to come and comment to some of your ideas and whether or not they're feasible. Selectman Montreal, you made an excellent point about the plowing. So I don't know. That's not my area of expertise, so that's why I rely on others to advise me. So I'd like them to come in and talk about that. And also, you know, the sidewalks. You know, each year, there's a long-term plan for sidewalks within the towns. And I know every year, Director Perry and the Highway Superintendent, Mr. Perkins, you know, advise the board as to what's next on the list. So maybe let's take a look and see. You know, I think I saw your statistics at 2014. So that's 7 years. So I'd like to get an update from DPW. Obviously, we'll let you know when that is so that you can be back. I think you should be part of that conversation. Maybe also talk about, you know, why it costs so much. I don't know the answer to that. So I'd like to hear that myself. The one thing, though, you know, each street is important to us as a board. We're representing the community. Each street is important to individual neighbors, and each street is important. And, you know, I wish you could take all the projects at one time and get them all done. Some of the projects that were referenced, you're absolutely right. They're not through streets, but they're on plan for their projects because of other reasons. For instance, one of them that you brought up, it's the quality of the street, or the lack of quality of the streets is affecting people's homes, inside their homes and all that. So it's a different problem, but it's a problem nonetheless. So, you know, we have to balance that too, because, you know, folks deserve to be able to live in dry homes, you know. But I want to thank you again. You've given us some homework. You've given us some things to think about. short term, we'll take those next steps. And as soon as I know when we'll have Public Works here, I'll reach out to you. And in the meantime, I invite you to keep the dialogue open between us. And thank you again. And thanks for helping Greg with the clicker. Great. Chief Poole and Detective Page, Mr. Sharples, thank you for being available tonight. Appreciate it. Okay. Madam Clerk, moving on to regular business, I believe.
Yes.
We have something. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you both.
Yes, under exemptions and credits and et cetera, I would move to approve a solar exemption for MAP 91, Lot 25, in the amount of $10,500 for the tax year 2022.
I'll second that. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passes 3-0. We do not have any permits or approvals, do we, Mr. Dean?
No, there's just, well, there is an approval in the packet. It is the financial report of the town.
Yeah,
Basically a DRA document that the board needs to sign off on.
Okay.
From the finance department. And I can send a sheet around that will be the lead sheet on that if you can just, if I can get a signature.
Okay.
Can you just explain for the public better than I can what all of these numbers mean, or what DRA uses it for?
So DRA, this is just a requirement at the end of each fiscal year. They require a submittal of your voted appropriations versus your actual expenditures for the year. So they keep track of that at DRA, and it's a requirement that we're having to submit to them. I don't know how much activity it actually gets at DRA, but it is a state report we're required to submit.
Does it affect at all our next tax setting? Tax rate setting?
It normally has to be in before our tax rate is set, so if it impacts it in that way. They need to have it before they'll move forward with our next tax rate.
Okay, thank you. All right, if there are no other questions, Mr. Dean, I think you need a motion to accept the New Hampshire DRA financial report of the budget of the 2021 budget.
Yes, that's fine.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passes 3-0. Thank you. All right, Mr. Dean, you're up with Town Manager's report, please.
Okay, so I'm here to report that we've had a leak at the pool. That is one of the first things I wanted to mention for the board. One of the main lines actually to the pool has sprung a leak, and Mr. Bisson is in the process of putting together some estimates for repair of that work, so we'll be back with the numbers once we know what they are. Because of the leak, the rec department actually got a bill that was in excess of $20,000 for the pool, so that's another thing for the board to think about as to whether you'll be willing to abate that given the issue that they ran into. So I don't have any further information for you right now, except that we're getting it, we're troubleshooting it and working to resolve it. Negotiations are well underway with our three bargaining units, SEIU and the fire department and the police department, so we'll be getting you an update on that shortly. We've had several meetings and they've gone pretty well so far, and we're in the midst of exchanging proposals and so forth, so we do have an active sessions going with the three groups. And then budget meetings, there have been several budget meetings with departments at this point. We wrap up toward the end of this week with Public Works, and then I'll be putting together the preliminary budget to transmit to the board and to the Budget Recommendations Committee shortly. Also, it is time for tax deeding. We have a list of tax deeds that I believe the board got a copy of, and we're encouraging people to pay those, so we have just as few as possible for you to consider next week. And I also wanted to recognize Dave Sharples, his work on the public safety study. Dave did a great job negotiating the scope and fee of that particular study, and out of the $100,000, they're actually going to do the lion's share of the work for $80,000.
Great.
Which gives us a cushion of $20,000 to work with for, I call it incidental expenses, which always come up during those kinds of processes. So LaValle Brenzinger is the name of the firm. I think I've said it before. They're going to be doing the study, and Dave should be before the board with a contract, I would imagine, if by your next meeting.
Okay, great.
So, and I think that's all I had, unless there are questions for me.
I don't have any questions per se, just a couple things I wanted to add. Will the board get a copy of the draft budget prior to the BRC meeting later this month?
My plan is to give it to the board on the 27th, and then the BRC on the 29th.
Fantastic.
So
Okay.
the answer is yes to that.
Great, thank you. Also, Swayze Park reopened to vehicular traffic one way on the 7th. I know I've driven by multiple days, and it seems to be fairly incident. Do you have an update?
I haven't heard of anything remarkable happening.
Okay.
I know there's lots of signage on Swayze
Yes.
Parkway to promote, the one-way and promote people being safe on the road. So
Okay.
hopefully that's having a good effect.
And I will add that Mr. Staples, the chair of the Swayze Park trustees, reached out to me to also indicate he's been driving by frequently to monitor that. Last but not least, Mr. Dean, you and I and the assistant town manager, Melissa Roy, had the pleasure of attending the 9/11 ceremony Saturday morning at the Public Safety Building with the new dedicated wreath and statues for the deceased police and
Right.
fire department respectively. It was a wonderful ceremony. It was nice to see members of the public there as well, members of each the respective departments, retired Chief Como. It was nice to see him. But I would like to personally thank not only the police and fire departments, excuse me, for the work they put into that area, but also the Public Works, I know, was pivotal, as well as the Parks and Rec Department, so.
Yeah, that was, majority of the work was done by Parks and Rec through Mr. Bison's department, and also through the Highway Department and Public Works. They did a fantastic job with that.
Great, thank you. Select Board Committee reports, Selectwoman Roundtree Olaf.
Two committees to report on. Arts and Culture met on August 10th and continued a discussion about the Exeter Cultural website. Also discuss a possible public art display where someone would donate sculptures, and I think Scott Ruffner is working with Greg Bisson over in Parks and Rec to figure out how that might be a possibility.
Great.
Since our meeting, Ann Kenny has stepped down from the committee. And so the question is, does the board need to vote on a new member, or do we automatically go to the alternate member?
You have two alternates.
We have two alternates, right? So what's the next step then is a question that's
So
being
as
posed.
a committee, you can determine which alternate.
Okay.
And you can make a recommendation to the board, but ultimately the committee can do that.
Okay. So they're meeting tomorrow, and I assume it'll be discussed tomorrow during that. Do we come back? I'll just come back to the board with what the recommendation
What the
is.
recommendation, we don't take any formal vote on that. That's up to
You
the
would.
committee. Yeah?
Yeah, you would, because the term, right now, the term the person is in is an alternate slot.
Right.
And basically, the person would have to be appointed to a full member slot. A little bit like the planning board.
Right, so we'll need
Okay.
to see what
Yeah.
and tenure was or was supposed to be, and then the alternate. Then do we need to then have another round of interviews for the alternate empty space?
So I stand corrected, what Mr. Dean says correct. The committee can pick the alternate, and then you make the recommendation, the board will appoint it to that term, as Mr. Dean described. And then, obviously, you want to start recruiting for that alternate, and they would submit the application to Mr. Dean's office, and then we would interview them downstairs.
Okay, great, I'll inform the committee tomorrow on that.
Perfect, thank you.
And then Housing Committee met on Friday, September 10th, and Selectwoman Gilman was there as a representative for the state. And we were just having another discussion, furthering discussion about workforce housing. Became a really interesting discussion, actually, on topics that I think we hadn't discussed before, and alternative solutions and possibilities. So I thought it was a great meeting.
Yeah.
Good to have you there with your input. And that's it on my end, unless you wanted to add on to that.
Well, I'll add on to that. I really enjoyed that meeting too, and out of it, Mr. Sharples, our town planner, had an idea for a different way of attracting businesses to help us out with housing. So he's going to work on that, but it won't be something that goes to the legislature this year. It's a little more complex, but it was a good meeting. There was lots of input, and it'll help me this year because we're going to have a lot more housing bills. Well, maybe not a lot more, but the same ones anyway. I also, the Heritage Commission held a public hearing on the demolition of a house at 10 Wadley Street. And ultimately, we agreed, we voted unanimously that we thought the building should be preserved and rehabilitated rather than removed. And I just want to remind everyone that this is only advice that we can give. We can't stop it or anything. And this particular project is only going to the building inspector for approval. If there's no other board that's looking at it. So that one's a little different than other ones we've done. And speaking of Wadley Street and demolition, we have Wednesday, the Demolition Review Committee subcommittee is going to look at 7 Wadley Street because that's proposed to be demolished also. And that, I think, is it.
Okay, thank you both.
Yep.
I have River Advisory on Thursday. The Sustainability Committee met last Tuesday, and I had a last-minute conflict and was unable to attend the meeting. However, I did speak with the chair of that committee, Chetna Parmer, prior to the meeting, and the one real big agenda item was a proposal that will be going before the Budget Recommendations Committee, and that is to increase hours from an employee currently working, reporting to Mr. Sharples, who is part-time, and the proposal would be to increase the hours to full-time and also assign the sustainability coordinating initiative to that person, and Mr. Sharples would then step back and she would still report to him. The Sustainability Committee fully supports this proposal. They'll be drafting a memo to the Budget Recommendations Committee, and I let Chair Parmer know that I supported it as well. So that was basically the big ticket on their agenda. I think that was it for me. So moving forward to correspondence, we have a memo from the fire department. COVID numbers continuing to climb steadily, fueling more concerns about the Delta variant. Exeter had 8 residents test positive for the virus over the past week, with 4 of those over the Labor Day weekend, with an additional 4 during the week. These have increased our total since March 2020 to 1,018, with 10 cases considered active. In the past week, New Hampshire had over 2,200 positive tests for a daily average of 319. There have been 10 COVID-19 related deaths statewide recorded in the past week, with 2 of them coming from Rockingham County. And also, we are becoming a bit more active with the Seacoast Region Public Health Network. More vaccine has been ordered, and regional vaccination sites have been identified at Pease during the Blue Angels Air Show, schools, and other large gatherings. Mr. Dean, would it be wise to maybe have Chief Wilking, or I don't think we need both, but either Chief Wilking or Mr. Murray come on a monthly basis if numbers continue to, so I don't want to waste their time, but it'd be nice if folks knew maybe monthly.
We can do that.
One of them? Mm-hmm. Okay. We have a request for Exeter to consider becoming a Purple Heart community, and the attached information describes what it means to be a Purple Heart community, and essentially asking the town to consider issuing a formal proclamation to be a Purple Heart community.
I would be very behind that, or support it, because the Independence Museum actually has one of the original Purple Heart medals. So I think it's kind of a nice link to the Purple Heart community designation.
I'm also supportive of this initiative. So, Mr. Dean?
Yeah, so what we'll do is we'll take the wording here and wordsmith it a little bit and draw up the proclamation for your next meeting.
Okay. And Selectwoman Gilman, you reminded me that this Friday will be the celebration of the 300th birthday of the
museum.
Gilman House, yep. And rounding out correspondence, we had some referencing the Swayze Parkway. We have a thank you from Family Promise of Seacoast, New Hampshire, thanking the board for the recent gift, and correspondence from Mr. Wyndham, our economic developer, regarding HB 154 and SB 102.
Yeah, can I talk a little bit
Please.
about those? HB 154 was a bill that would develop housing opportunity zones, much like the 79E. Because we've already adopted 79E, we could use this tool, and what it is tax incentives for developers to reuse existing stock, invest in the buildings they already have if they're 40 years old, or at least 40 years old, or older. And it's more sustainable to use existing stock of housing than we have, and there's potential to increase units from single families to more, depending on, this one depends on our zoning, doesn't change our zoning in particular. Got changed into SB 102 and was signed by the governor, but the question keeps coming up about when you have low income or median or affordable as they're defined in the RSAs, and you say, I'm giving you a tax incentive of 5 years for giving us X units of affordable housing, then the question comes up, after those X years, how do we know it continues? Mm-hmm. That was one of the discussions at the housing meeting. So one of the things that I'm discussing with a couple other people at the house is how we can do that, and they've recommended solutions for ensuring that what we want to be affordable to young people or young families stays that way even when they grow out of them. So that's what that is.
Thank you. And that was it for correspondence. Reviewing the board calendar, we'll meet again on the 27th, and Mr. Dean will have the draft budget, and I know the BRC's meeting on the 29th.
Household Hazardous Waste Day.
I'm sorry? Oh, yes, could I forget that? Can I borrow your screen? 'Cause I borrowed mine. So on Saturday, October 16th, from 8 to 1, the Exeter Public Works Garage will be hosting the waste collection, collecting for Exeter, Stratham, Newfields, and other neighboring towns. The requirements are online registration. Sorry.
That's okay.
Online registration, is that on the DPW website, Mr. Dean?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, they
And
have a link to it.
And the cost is $15?
Yes.
Charged to offset cost of collection. And they ask that social distancing, do we need
Be part of
volunteers?
it.
Do we need volunteers for that, or?
If people are interested in volunteering, they can reach out to Public Works or an RPC.
Okay.
We can point them in the right direction.
Okay, great.
I would also recommend becoming a household hazardous waste champion in your neighborhood, so 10 people don't have to go, just whoever has the biggest vehicle.
Good point.
Depending on what you have. I'm the fluorescent light person.
Thank you. Mr. Dean, do you have the October calendar in front of you? I think we're going to be impacted by,
Columbus Day is the 11th.
That would be
Indigenous
it.
Peoples' Day.
that would be our next meeting, correct?
Our next meeting would be after the 27th. That would be, if you were meeting
Yeah.
every other week, that would be the day. So,
So would the board be inclined to meet the week after the 27th? Because we've done the 3-week thing twice this summer because of holidays, Mr. Dean. So I know we try to do it every other week, but maybe
Yes.
the 27th, and then whatever that following
October
Monday is.
4th.
October 4th,
Yes.
and then the 18th.
the 18th. Okay.
Okay. Let's set that then.
I'm doing that right now.
And finally, Mr. Dean, do we need to move into non-public session this evening?
I think we should wait.
I do too, but I wanted to see, is this something pressing? Time pressing,
One of the items is,
so we can't wait till the 20th?
yeah, unfortunately, I wish we could.
Okay. Well, we do have a quorum,
So
so I need the,
it would be E, 91A32E.
All right, Mr. Chair, I move to enter into a non-public session under RSA 91A2E.
Second.
okay, motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Madam Clerk?
Selectwoman Roundtree Olaf.
Aye.
Clerk says aye. Mr. Chair.
Aye, passes 3-0. The board will be moving into non-public session. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to Exeter TV. Exeter TV is the town's public and government access channels, available on Comcast channels 98 and 22. Channel 98 is your channel. If you have an idea for a program, want to host your own talk show, or submit a film, we're here to get your content on television. On Channel 22, we bring you live and replay coverage of government meetings and other town updates. A third channel, Blue Hawk Media, is operated by SAU 16 and can be found on Channel 13, with all your school sports, events, and meetings. You can watch Exeter TV online at exeternh.tv, Apple TV, and on Roku. Find us on social media for extra content. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell to get notified about live streams and new content. Tune in to our platforms every other Friday to watch the Exeter Biweekly Report, with recaps of recent events, updates from town departments, and messages from nonprofits in your area. If you head to our website, exeternh.tv, we invite you to sign up to our newsletter to receive monthly updates about new content, upcoming meetings, and more. We'd like to thank you for taking the time to watch Exeter TV and hope that you tune in to our other content as well.